Hello. So in this video, we're going to talk about patch writing. This is a particular technique that's often considered a form of plagiarism, but it also actually has a relatively useful benefit to it. So we're going to talk about what patch writing is, and we're going to talk about some of the arguments made against it and some of the arguments made for it. So basically, patch writing involves taking someone else's text, something that they have created, and making slight alterations to it so that it doesn't match up word for word with the original, but it conveys the same sentiments. So I'm going to show you an example. I've pulled a couple of sentences out of this textbook, Writing That Works, by Walter E. Olio, Charles T. Brousseau, and Gerald J. Allen, which I'm teaching out of this semester. And I'm going to show you how patch writing might work. So these are the two sentences that I pulled out. Certain types of introductory words are followed by a comma. One example is a transitional word or phrase, however, in addition, that connects the preceding clause. Sorry, that should be clause or sentence with the thought that follows. Now, I'm going to actually bump the size of this up a little bit so it's a bit easier to read, but still legible. So what I'm going to do now is patch write this sentence. And to make this a little bit easier, I'm going to turn on track changes so that you will be able to see the changes that I make. You'll be able to see how I've restructured things, changed the language, etc., without altering the meaning of it. Okay, so this is my very quick patch writing job on this. Because track changes is on, it's not super easy to immediately read, so I'm going to switch this quickly to no markup. So now we've got a comma follows some introductory words. For example, transitional words or phrases. However, in addition, connect a preceding clause or sentence with what follows. This is not the original text. As we go back, you can see where I've changed it. The structure of the first sentence is different. I've reversed the order of the information in that sentence, started with a comma follows as opposed to are followed by a comma at the end. And then I've switched out certain types for the word some. The meaning is unchanged. In the second sentence, I haven't adjusted the sentence structure, though I've changed the tense of some of the verbs, the tense of some of the words. So instead of one example, I have 4 example, and then a comma. That actually gives us an introductory clause, ironically enough, what the sentences are about. But because I've put that comma there, I can take out is a in front of transitional word. And because we don't have a there, that singular definite article, that singular indefinite article, it's gone to words or phrases. Then I've gone from that connect the preceding clause to connect a preceding clause. So this is active voice here. And then instead of the thought that follows, I've just put what follows. Sorry. So nothing is fundamentally changed here. What the sentence says remains the same, but it's not the same. And this is where some of the debates about patchwriting as a form of plagiarism come in, because so one classic technique for detecting plagiarism in the digital age has been to copy paste a sentence or a portion of a sentence and put it into Google. Now, if I copy paste a comma follows some introductory words and put that into Google, it's not going to pull up this textbook because that's not the phrasing that they used. It's different enough that I'm unlikely to get caught for plagiarism. However, what I've done here with patchwriting, according to people who view this as a form of plagiarism, is I have taken their ideas and presented them as my own. In this sense, this is a form of plagiarism, right? Because plagiarism is not about protecting phrasing necessarily. It's about protecting intellectual property, though there are debates about the relationship between phrasing as such and the idea being expressed. Now, in this case, this actually wouldn't be a big deal because the function of commas is common knowledge. So that's a whole separate issue. I think I've done a video on common knowledge before, but for the purposes of illustrating patchwriting, this would be the argument that what Olio, Broussard, and Allred said is their intellectual property. If I change a few of the words, adjust some of the stuff, and then present it as though it's my original thought, then I am misrepresenting my scholarship, and I'm claiming intellectual property rights over something that came from a source. Now, the other sort of caveat to this is if I then put Olio, Broussard, and Allred, page whatever number, I don't remember what number it was. At the end of this, well, now I've paraphrased. So that's a different thing. Patchwriting is not the same as paraphrasing. Paraphrasing still involves citing a source, giving that source credit for their work. Where it drifts into patchwriting is when you do what I've done here, where you present a slightly revised version of someone else's work as though it's your own intellectual property. And again, many people see this just straight up as a form of academic dishonesty, and most I think universities, most writing instructors would call this academic dishonesty. Now, I'm going to stop sharing because we've sort of got the sense of it. There is a different side to the question of patchwriting, which is that patchwriting can actually function really, really well as a writing training tool, right? Because the people who are published, particularly scholarly works, they should be well written within their disciplinary confines. I mean, what counts as good writing is A, subjective to a certain extent, B, rooted in different disciplines. So what's good, say, writing for a chemistry report is going to be very different than what's good writing for philosophy or literary analysis or whatever it is. But that's not, again, that's sort of extraneous to the point that I'm making, which is that one strategy you can use as someone learning to write within a particular field is patchwriting, because you practice building from a model that you know is successful and figuring out how the authors did, or author or authors did that thing. So as you get a sense of, okay, here's how I can phrase things, here's how I can express things to make sure that my ideas are clear and understandable for the audience, then you actually learn writing techniques yourself. This is a bit, the argument made for this supporting argument made for patchwriting is a bit like the idea of using artistic models, right? Like if you want to become a great painter, one of the things you typically do as you're being trained to paint is you go to museums or galleries or whatever it is, and you practice copying the works of the great masters so that you can figure out how they did the things that they did. Dylan Thomas, the great Welsh poet, said something to the effect of that when he started out, he wrote endless imitations, though he never dreamed them to be imitations, because he needed to figure out how this form worked, how poetry worked as such. And so this is the same kind of thing, or the same kind of argument is made in favor of patchwriting, that this is an imitative form and therefore something that's a good pedagogical tool. Now, I'd put the caveat on that there is a big difference between I am using this as a tool to learn to write well, and this is something that I should turn in for a class or try and publish. If you rewrite Shakespeare's Sonnet 18, for instance, and just change some of the words around, you should not try and publish that. In the same way, if you are writing a paper for a class or for publication especially, and you take someone else's work and you switch your own words in, I would say that's pretty clearly academic dishonesty, because at that stage, you are implicitly claiming that this is your original intellectual work. And if it isn't, then you're committing plagiarism or fraud, depending on how your particular institution defines it. So that's what patchwriting is, and that's some of the debates about it. I would be very, very cautious on a practical level about doing patchwriting for anything that you're going to give to someone else. Again, whether that's turning it in for a class, whether that's publication, whatever it is. But it can be a useful training tool. So if you want to think of it that way, that's not a bad thing to do. You just want to be aware, I'm thinking of this as a training tool and not as something to produce my own original work.